There's a lot of doom and gloom about the future of Apex. Content creators are in shambles and struggling, seemingly not being able to make ends meet. But after looking at the data, I'm starting to think that the game is doing a lot better than we really think. And by the end of this video, you might be thinking the same. There's been a lot of talk about how Apex is dying lately. We recently hit the lowest point in Twitch viewership since 2020, with images such as this one showing what could have been compared to what's really going on. The Gaming Merchant, another prolific YouTuber, also recently posted a video talking about the state of the game, and Imperial Hal even said that he lost thousands of viewers compared to usual. And when you're looking at the Twitch viewership, which most players and even community members go by, it does look like Apex is in a bit of a rough patch. And sure, there are plenty of reasons to assume that, other than the Post Malone Free Strikes event, which by the way was super fun, and now that it's gone, Apex does feel a lot slower. We haven't really seen any huge, fun, or interesting gameplay events for a really long time. Many players are bored of the content that's being put out by the game, but most importantly, by the creators. And I think that's an important distinction that we have to make here. As somebody who has been making content for quite a while now, on a large scale and aimed towards the general or maybe even the casual community, I believe I might be one of the most qualified persons to be talking about this. Because the community that watch Twitch streams make up for such a tiny amount of the player base that in the large picture, or maybe even in Respawn's eyes, they might not even matter. They're just a blip. Better yet, the people who watch Twitch streams are generally speaking diehard players, or at the very least as far from a casual player that you'll ever see. Hell, most of you guys watching this video, even though you might not play the game a lot or take it that seriously, are probably a lot more dedicated than the actual average casual. The real casual Apex player plays maybe once a week, maybe less on their PlayStation or Xbox, and they probably don't consume a single piece of content about the game. I mean, back when I got into gaming, I was a casual. I mean, everyone starts somewhere, right? And it took me literal years before I started even thinking about watching content around the games I played. I mean, I was in a few communities, but I never really looked past that point over the horizon. But why am I being so annoying in making this distinction? Why is it so important to talk about this? Because recently, Nerch posted a graph which reminded me all about this whole thing. It's definitely not as bad as you might think, that we're regressing years back in views, all the way back to 2020. Because while there is a lot of panic and stressing out and wondering what's around the corner, Nerch's graph shows what's really going on, or at least I believe so. And that's this graph. This beautiful graph compares the amount of concurrent players, which is in green, and the Apex Twitch viewership, which is in yellow, over the entire game's lifespan. There is no data before 2020, presumably because Nerch was quoting the Apex Legends Intel tweet, which only mentioned 2020, so we'll have to go with what we have. In this graph, you can clearly see a relationship between the amount of viewers and the amount of players that the game has. But there are never more viewers than there are concurrent players. And it's an interesting graph, but you have to understand this doesn't do the real situation justice either. I mean, there's content to be consumed on other platforms, more curated, higher quality content that you can find on YouTube, on Facebook technically, on TikTok, Instagram, or whatever it is people are more inclined to be watching on. There are also way more platforms you can play on than just Steam. Apex can be played on Origin, and it can be played on virtually every single console out there. We don't have the data for the curated content, and we don't have the data for the consoles, so we are working with breadcrumbs. But trust me when I tell you, the amount of viewership on Twitch is so much smaller than the amount of viewership on YouTube. According to Twitch Tracker, Twitch's record of the most amount of viewers on the site itself was 6 million, while YouTube easily eclipses that, with the concurrent live stream viewers, and keep in mind live streaming on YouTube is terrible, peaking at almost 15 million at one point, with over 120 million users visiting the site every single day. It's an incredibly important distinction to be made, because the Twitch viewership is such a small drop in the bucket, and the same can be said about Apex on Steam. While we don't have the specific user data, from what I've gathered from talking to Apex developers and watching the actions the company has made over the years, PC just appears to be such a small blip of the entire player base. I even get the impression that we're counting the PC players in maybe the hundreds of thousands, but the console players would be counted in the millions. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's also an important point that nobody talks about: the pandemic and the viewership inflation that it caused. Because obviously the pandemic changed the world as we know it, and during those years, or that time where everybody was locked in with nothing to do, content, especially live streams, skyrocketed. And this was never sustainable in the long run, and as everyone started to return to their jobs, they don't have the same time to watch live streams for nearly as long or as often, which also naturally will lead to a decrease in viewership. The bubble kind of bursted. I mean, you can even see the viewership starting to slow down around the time when the lockdown started to go away. Let's bring our attention back to that very graph. You can notice a trend where the viewership more or less correlates to the player base all the way up until May in 2022. And that was kind of a while, so you might not remember what happened, so thankfully I have done the math for you. What happened in May 2020 that made this large of a change to the community? The release of Season 13, where we received the most ill-received rank systems of all time. This rank system was sort of built in favor of the streamers or the competitive players, with the intention of making ranked feel more like a professional or competitive game. At the start it kind of worked, but as casuals got fed up with playing ranked Apex because they just wanted pubs with a different skin, I guess, the matchmaker started struggling and the quality of games quickly took a turn for the worse. Respawn even went back on their project with a hotfix trying to fix a dying ranked population, but they failed, and ever since Season 13 was released, we've seen tons of different attempts to restore the faith in ranked and make people play it, but the value has been completely lost to the whole community. I mean, the current version of ranked no longer rewards skill, but rather time spent, and from the streamer's point of view, it's nothing more than a full stack pub stomping, the complete opposite of what Respawn wanted to achieve with that Season 13 patch. Also, a side note, it is worth noting that this has been a problem ever since ranked came out, so it's not something that's been exclusive to ranked as we know it today. But what's different from now and Season 2, 3, or 4, or whatever, is that this time around, the Apex community has been disillusioned. They know that ranked is a joke. And you can see that in the very graph. After the release of Season 13, viewership took a huge tumble. There were also changes to the pub's matchmaking somewhere along the line, which made it harder to create fun content as a creator, all in favor of defending the low-skill, actual casual players that normally would turn into cannon fodder. And also a quick note is that despite the ranked Twitch streamers struggling, it's worth noting that a lot of the casual streamers seem to do fine, if not better than they have done before. Examples being aceu, Lemonhead, or Faide. Despite the Twitch viewership falling off, they seem to be doing just fine. But anyways, after Season 14, the viewership starts falling off and is no longer pegged to the amount of players in the game. Dare I say, the player base is still thriving, despite the Twitch viewership being down. I'm sure both EA and Respawn knows this, and this is why they keep making the same decisions that they've been doing so far. But what does this mean? What can we learn from it? There's a few points I want to mention. First, as I said in this tweet, there's no surprise that the average player doesn't enjoy the full freestack demolishing ranked players who can't fight back for 12 hours a day, and it's no surprise that the viewers got bored of watching the same thing happen over and over again with no stakes. Secondly, by looking at the up-and-coming creators lately, if you are good enough to do well enough in pubs, you can thrive as a creator. But just winning or doing well isn't enough anymore. You usually need a cool niche or keep doing movement things constantly and just keep people engaged, which is sort of what's needed nowadays. The average viewer is tired of the boring stacking or the 100 of, oh, I got a 20 bomb in this crazy game. They want to see something more unique, something more creative. There needs to be a value in the content that's being put out. And I mean, not that I'm perfect or anything, but I try to make sure that all the videos I create provide some type of value, because I understand how important that is. And sorry, weird content rant aside, what we can learn is that the average viewer is tired of boring, free-stacking ranked, or run-of-the-mill pub stomper content. They want to see good content, and most streamers, sadly, don't provide it. They just go live on Twitch and they stomp ranked for 12 hours a day. So the viewers leave Twitch. They might hit up YouTube, they might hit up TikTok, and I don't have the numbers for it, but since I never really noticed any significant dips to my viewership in the same ways that the streamers have, odds are they're just going to YouTube instead, which does lead to the Twitch viewership going down and the game looking dead in the eyes of the public, because YouTube metrics aren't public. That being said, even though the barrier of entry is high, we have seen tons of streamers and content creators pulling insanely good numbers from doing fun challenges as well. Most famously, we have his Watson, who's been doing 24-hour streams trying to get 20 bombs on every legend, 4k damage on every gun, some speedrun challenges, you name it. And when he posted some of these videos on YouTube, most notably the 4000 damage with every legend speedrun, he managed to get over 1 million views in a week because the average viewer is just so starved for interesting content. Another example is a guy called Dreamstrike, who made a whole new channel and made a video about trying Apex for the first time. It was highly produced, very well edited and paced, and it popped off with numbers just like Watson's. Because if the content is good, it's fun, it's innovative, people will watch. And obviously, don't get me wrong, Apex has a plethora of issues, many of which I've covered on his channel, but the game seems to be thriving despite of them. As a player, I wish there were fewer issues, and as a content creator, I wish there were more ways to create interesting content, but I don't think anyone needs those tools in order to actually create good content in the first place. Yes, we're in a bit of a dip overall if you look at the player count, but it's not as pegged to the viewership as everyone seems to think. And honestly, if you ever wanted to make Apex content, now is the time. Anything good or innovative will stand out because the content space is so stale and the Apex community is yearning for some good, interesting content. So I say, go for it. Just like we saw in the graph, the amount of viewers on Twitch tells such a tiny part of the story, but if we look at the whole picture, despite just a small dip in players, the game is doing just as well as it has all along. There's just not really content people want to watch. And yeah, that's just a quick rant, my thoughts about it. This was a bit of a different style of a video, and if you guys want to watch high-effort curated content, do check out the videos. We do spend a lot of time cooking them, so I hope you'll find something worth your fancy. For example, this one is an absolute banger. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.